Small LDLs can cause heart disease.
No. We already covered it, Gil.
Large LDLs can cause heart disease.
No. We already covered it, Gil.
If you have sex and your blood pressure changes, your heart rate changes. Nope,
Come on, bro. You didn't have to bring that up.
I don't want that. Take
Are you having sex?
untested pill to
Gil Carvalho has decided to grow a set of balls, apparently, in the last few months, and has decided to go on a rampage reacting to a bunch of people that, at the very least, are far more sensible when it comes to nutrition and health than he is.
Keeping our glucose levels steady is the foundation of physical and mental health.
No, it is not the foundation of that. At the very least, that's your opinion. However, glucose goddess, that's who he's reacting to today. Can't remember her actual name, and in fact, I don't know how to pronounce it. I remember that. But yet it is a foundation. To say it's the foundation is a little too much, I think.
Question.
actually,
Well, there is some question there. There's it is a little bit equivocal, but okay. Gil here, he's actually. See what he has to say.
lots of questions because that's not true at all. I mean,
No, that's your opinion too, Gil. Good. Look, she gave you a layup, and you couldn't even take that.
not even close.
Oh, not even close. Still your opinion. And by the way, that opinion is, in my opinion, far from being substantiated with any degree of evidence with any scientific integrity behind it. So, okay.
Is carbs, so it's gonna cause my glucose to go up. My insulin is gonna.
Yeah, because carbohydrates, exogenous carbohydrates, are the most insulinogenic macronutrient. They're not a macronutrient, definitionally speaking. Check out a video I did on that, top right corner of the screen. Boy, that's going to have like 1 million views by the time, a month or two has passed because of how often I reference it. But seriously, go check that video out because it's not a macronutrient. It is a drug. Sugar is a drug. Did a video on this too. Look, it's true. Whether I like it or not, whether you, Gil, like it or not, whether you, my dear viewer, like it or not. So they're the most insulinogenic macronutrient. Their requirement, exogenously speaking, effectively post-weaning for human beings is 0. And actually for every single animal on the face of this planet, except for like nectarivores, so hummingbirds and sunbirds, for example. Some bats, but even then, small amounts of carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, mainly when they eat fruit. It's more fibrous because it's untouched by human beings. So not required and above a certain physiological concentration in the bloodstream that is most conducively achieved by consuming the damn thing, is toxic. Glycation, subsequent formation of advanced glycation end products, diabetes, chronically elevated blood glucose, and nothing else. Exclusively defined, and measured as such. Gil. So, okay. Well, look, you know what? I will say, to be honest, it's refreshing to see this side of Gil because perhaps I've just been missing it. Maybe he's been like this before, but I've never seen it. It's refreshing. So let's get into this. Can't wait.
This is platinum nonsense.
Right. So Gil's going to tell us all about what nonsense is. Yes, Gil, tell us all about what is nonsense and what isn't nonsense. Tell us how to interpret, human nutrition science and get into the numbers and the data. Show us how well you're actually able to interpret that data. As a PhD, by the way. A PhD. It's sad. It's sad to see.
Okay, you guys asked me to take a look at the glucose goddess. Gotta respect the confidence to call yourself the god of something. Very healthy ego. By the way, we messaged
Tell us all about ego, Gil.
her and asked if she wanted to come on, talk about her ideas. We have not heard back, so
Well, Gil, not everyone has to talk to you. Not everyone wants to, Gil. And that's fine, and I'm sure that you understand that too. But that's like saying that someone pleading the fifth is evidence of their guilt. No, they just didn't come on. They just didn't say something. They didn't speak. All right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't, kind of thing. So, okay.
Respond, or whoever handles their messages up there on Mount Olympus.
Instead of having
Tee-hee!
orange juice and oats in the morning, which are carbs and turn to glucose in our body.
Well, there's a lot more in there too. And also, not all carbs are the same, by the way. And that's not me exonerating carbohydrates. I'm saying that some are worse than others, actually. Not that any of them are good, right? Or indicated. Again, the distinction between indicated and contraindicated. A closer look and revision of mainstream health axioms that have perpetuated illness, disorder, and disease for over a century. Come on. Pick up your copy if you haven't already. Link in the description below for paperback, hardcover, ebook, and self-narrated audiobook edition, because I'm all about authenticity. I respond to my own messages. At least at the moment. I'm getting a lot of them. But, anyway. Yeah, so indicated and contraindicated is the distinction we should make. But there are some carbohydrates that are worse than others. Fructose seems to be the most damaging, just from many inferences that we have. A composite inference, chemically speaking, we can kind of predict how it's going to be reactive, or how reactive it's going to be compared to things like glucose and then galactose. They're all isomers of each other, effectively. I mean, fructose and glucose are definite isomers of each other. Basically, they're made up of the exact same building blocks, just in different orders. It's kind of like if you think of like a little Lego thing that you build. You can take it apart, and with those exact same pieces, you can build something else. It's the same kind of thing. That does mean that they have different chemical properties, though. Fructose seems to be worse in many ways, not just because of its reactivity, but also how it's metabolized. And then you've also got galactose. I'm not familiar enough with galactose to really opine something about that, or assert something, assert a prediction or an opinion about it. So, yeah, it's not just carbohydrates, though. That was my original point. It's lots of vitamin C, far beyond what you actually require as a human being. Okay, why does that matter? Well, vitamin C in excess is converted into oxalate. It's ascorbic acid, and then dehydroascorbic acid is the oxidized form, and then it eventually will convert into oxalates if it's not recycled. Especially in the presence of poor redox potential, which can happen whenever you're chronically inflamed from, I don't know, damaging your tissues with eating a bunch of carbohydrates. So that's something to consider as well. You've got phytates in the oats, really phytic acid, which then converts into phytates, and then you've got lectins in there. You've also got oxalates and oxalic acid, and then you've got fiber in there in soluble but also insoluble forms, the latter of which is probably the most harmful, because fiber itself is an anti-nutrient and also abrades the enteric lining, which is why it's highly associated with increased mucus secretion. Tell me a time when mucus is secreted in higher concentrations outside of the context of irritation to the tissue. I mean, that's something to consider, at least. To at least consider. Let's just put it that way. And ferments into aldehydes and alcohol and a bunch of nasty byproducts, and we can't digest it. That's the biggest point here. Can't digest fiber. And last I checked, if you can't digest something, you shouldn't be eating it. But yeah, so lots of bad things. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be eating a breakfast, if you're going to eat breakfast at all, that consists primarily of the flesh, and associated fat of large ruminant animals with added fat, because we're looking at an approximation to an ancestrally consistent diet, given our modern context, before people exploit that in the forms of butter, tallow, lard, suet, and ghee, added salt to taste, and water. Yeah, but don't do that immediately if you're not doing that already. 6 to 8 week transition period. Change about 1 or 2 foods here and there a week. Replace them. There you go. Until you're fully there. Usually the slower the better, but don't do too slow of an amount of time. Sometimes you can make things worse in that regard. eating mixed meals and stuff like that for long periods of time. So,
Have eggs. I'm not even kidding. Eggs are better for you than having.
well, they're more indicated because of their composition, their amino acid and fatty acid profile, and their carbohydrate profile, or lack thereof. Yeah, they're more congruous with what our species evolved to withstand. It's not to say that we actually did evolve to withstand an introduction of many eggs routinely throughout our ancestral lineage, because it doesn't seem to be the case. But it's more nuanced than that. It's not exactly about the specific food. That would be like saying, well, we didn't evolve eating cow all the time. Well, yes, but that's not the point. It's their composition. So same thing here with eggs, but if you don't cook them fully, the whites, they actually do have anti-nutrients in them, and they seem to flare people up, which just goes to show it's not a food that we are ostensibly most genotypically evolved to withstand, according to the Darwinian principles of evolution. So, there you go, something to consider. But yes, I do believe eggs are more indicated than things like orange juice and oatmeal. So, you know.
And juice in the morning for your heart, absolutely.
Yes, I believe so as well, because cardiovascular disease in any form, whether it's a stroke, whether it's a, actual myocardial infarction, not exactly cardiac arrest, but those blockages, that we're talking about, are caused by lesions to the arteries that do not ameliorate fully, if at all. It's atherosclerotic lesions. You actually have to you have to have damage to arteries in order to accrue that much plaque, and if you're genetically normal. So,
Blanket statement right out of the gate.
right, yes. Well, sometimes blanket statements are completely appropriate to be promulgating and espousing and asserting, positing. Choose your word, Gil. Sometimes they're not, and I would have phrased what she said a bit differently, and in fact, that's why I'm pausing even whenever she was talking. I'm sure that I'll be pausing a lot more when you start talking, which is okay. That's okay, isn't it? Because as much as we're not going to deal with the whole video, because it's 44 minutes long, we'll be dealing with quite a bit of it. I have time. So, continue, Gil.
No matter who you are, I know nothing.
Yes, because we are all of the same genome. In other words, the same speciation. Okay? There are distinctions in genotype that influence disease development, that influence propensity for developing disease, the same thing. The way in which deviations away from our species appropriate nature and lifestyle will manifest themselves, whether it's psoriasis, whether it's diabetes, whether it's obesity, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's, or not Alzheimer's, sorry, that's always old age, isn't it? But whether it's, brain fog and joint pain and whatever it may be, genotype influences that. But we must remember that we are still of the same genome. Species appropriate diets diets for a species do not discriminate based on genotype, nor phenotype, actually. However, with human beings, phenotype can play a role in like how you should adapt someone to a carnivore diet, depending on how damaged they are phenotypically. Depending on the phenotypic adaptation to something, and presentation is rather what I should say, because we are deviating so starkly and sharply away compared to other animals. So, you want to be careful not to make an appeal to ignorance fallacy. It may very well discriminate based on phenotype in other animals, if they had the opportunity to deviate as much as we've deviated. So, anyway, yeah, blanket statement for a reason across our genome. For the same reason that I say that no one across our genome should be consuming fiber, for the reasons that I've laid out, and also more that I haven't laid out. Check out Lee Kopus, Kent Carnivore. I talk to him quite frequently behind the scenes, and it gets brought up relatively often. His problem that he had with fiber. Okay, go check Lee Kopus's channel out. Go ahead and do that. Go see what he dealt with, which was very clearly due to fiber. You always want to be careful not to draw a causal distinction from an association, but you can have strong opinions on associations. There you go.
about you, eggs are better for you.
Well, they're more indicated, and we covered that, didn't we?
I can easily give you examples of people who would be better off with the eggs, others who would be worse off with the eggs.
No, you cannot give an example of that in the case of a human being that has, well, the genotype of a human being. Okay, Gil? No. If by better you mean, prove that it's less indicated. Unless you mean with respect to what I was just saying, which is, if they're so starkly deviating away from their ancestrally consistent, what their genes are designed to withstand. Again, then perhaps for those reasons. But I doubt that that's actually what you mean. And also, I highly doubt that you would ever say that it's ever appropriate for them to eventually shift to the eggs, which is actually the bigger problem here. Oh, it might be better off for this person to have some orange juice in the morning, which, by the way, no, I'm sorry. No, even with the caveat I gave, a glass of damn sugar? No. Gil, no. But even if you were to even make that argument and we were to say, okay, fine, would you ever actually get them to get off of that? I suspect not. I could be wrong. I don't want to assert things that I don't have any evidence for. Innocent until proven guilty. But I do have my suspicions. So anyway, cool.
Egg allergy, one of the most common food.
Okay, so you're talking about people that. So actually, what you're doing, Gil, is you're missing the damn point, and you're doing it purposely. You're doing it flagrantly. You're being deliberately obtuse here. That is silly and stupid. Well, what if you have an egg allergy? Her point, Gil, as the self-proclaimed glucose goddess, which is irony, by the way, but I understand the criticism. I would never really call myself a god of anything, okay? Even if it were ironic. Something doesn't sit right with me on an ego level, but as he said, but still, okay, whatever. Her point, being the glucose goddess, is that it has less sugar and it keeps your blood sugar stable because it's filled with protein and fat, which slows absorption of glucose if you were to even consume it exogenously. But also, most importantly, it doesn't have any to begin with. That's her point. Okay? I'm not the biggest fan of glucose goddess. But it doesn't mean, once again, as I said in the beginning, that she isn't more sensible than you on diet. Because from everything I've seen, she is. Because at least she understands what glycation is. And that you don't have to be diabetic for glucose spikes to be a problem for you. Okay? She's more credible than Paul Saladino, and that's saying something.
Allergies on the planet. So careful with the blanket statements.
Well, again, not her point. And you know what, Gil? You're smarter than that. And you're better than that. And you know that's not what she meant. So unless it's your team of marketers telling you to make comments like that because it's going to be provoking and catchy and punchy, then, I mean, come on. It's just not... You can do better. And you should actually take that as a compliment instead of me saying that you're that stupid that you'd make that mistake. You are smarter than that. You can do better. Okay? Come on.
To have a deep look at what's going on with eggs, what they actually do to our health, because...
Well, that's kind of reductionist. You can look at a more macro level, but we need to be careful with introducing lots of noise into our signals or signal. So, okay, keeping that in mind, let's continue.
Of us are still stuck in the 90s when it comes to what eggs do to us.
Right. So now what she's talking about is cholesterol and saturated fat and all that stuff and heart disease. Right. Yeah. The low fat craze, the late 80s and 90s. Yeah. Yep.
And many things from the 90s we've moved on from. So it's time to move on from bad egg science. So that's
right. Exactly. Which is basically all egg science because it's all human nutrition science, which is flawed in many ways and is a science that isn't really science at all, but theology, which fine, but you better be careful with reporting theology. in terms of how you report it, particularly. And it's hardly ever informative, and actually is something that is more important to understand the limitations of than what it actually can inform upon. That actually goes for all science, though. That's more important. So, okay. Yeah, lest we forget, by the way, that just as a side note, cholesterol and saturated fat and heart disease and all that, the lipid heart hypothesis was actually it was founded in the 1890s. It was first put forth in the 1890s by a Russian scientist by the name of Nikolai N. Anichkov, who force-fed rabbits pure cholesterol and saw that they developed heart disease. Rabbits being herbivores, and also rabbits not being designed to be force-fed something in high amounts, and then was later actually furthered to a more public degree by Ansel Keys, who was a fraud and lied, or at least, at the very, very, very least, he selectively reported his data, which is already quite offensive of a crime. Selectively just reported his data, and in which the sugar industry as well helped to fabricate and manipulate data with the help of 3 Harvard scientists, actually, to make it appear as if saturated fat and cholesterol were causing heart disease, when all of the studies that were performed at the time, that still had plenty of limitations, seemed to suggest pretty strongly it was actually the sugar. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're done. I think we're done with that.
Into it.
Okay, great. So she's going to point out the bad egg science, and she's going to steer us towards the good science, I guess. Great. Is the yellow
Well, yeah, great. So let's see.
hair supposed to symbolize an egg?
What is in an egg?
Yes.
So, this is an
Well, this isn't really, I suspect this is going to be a little anti-scientific, but look, I'm rooting for her. Let's see what she does.
and we have the yellow, or the yolk of the egg, and we have the white part of the egg. So the yolk of the egg is mostly fat. So it has 5 grams of fat, of which 185 milligrams of cholesterol. And
Oh no! Oh no! You know that thing that doesn't cause heart disease? First of all, dietary cholesterol is actually not really associated strongly at all with increases in with increases in blood cholesterol. Okay? So when it comes to cholesterol absorption, that's tightly regulated by the body. Most cholesterol seems to come from, obviously, saturated fat, because your liver is the one that produces the thing that actually produces the majority of the cholesterol in your body, which tells you how important it is. Not to say that by that logic, since it's clearly important, that therefore you should be consuming it. By that logic, you can't make that argument, because then you could make the same argument for glucose. Well, your liver produces so much of it, so it just goes to show how important it is for the body. So you should be consuming a ton of it. And that's not what I'm saying, but it does go to show the importance of it still. It does, because glucose is also important. So it's essential for life. So, yeah, cool. Cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. We already covered in the beginning. You require damage to arteries, and I can get into the nitty gritty if you'd like. Or you can buy my book, if we don't in this video, my kind dear viewer, because I do a very, very good job of covering every single last iota of information regarding that topic. We get into the hemodynamics of it. We get into, I mean, not just the hemodynamics. I mean, that's just one section of a ton of material in there. So you're missing out if you haven't gotten your copy. But anyway, yeah, so dietary cholesterol, first and foremost, isn't really strongly correlated with it. And also, even if it were, well, cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease, and you don't need to worry about it unless you're severely genetically abnormal, in which case you would know about it, because you'd be dead before the age of 13, oftentimes. Or you'll have had sickle cell anemia at one point, things of that nature. And you know what? Actually, sickle cell anemia, that's not an example. That's actually not really an example of that at all. I don't even know why I said that. That's an example of what I'm saying, which is That's an example of something that reinforces my the truth and what I'm promulgating, which is damage to arteries is what causes atherosclerosis. Because anyway, yeah, nothing to worry about. So cool, we're good.
Important word cholesterol for this episode. It has 3 grams of protein and it has a ton of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants.
Right. Okay. So 3 grams of protein is nothing. And yes, lots of vitamins and minerals. That's actually what I think is more important when it comes to, the nutrition element of it. It's not the macro element, it's the micro element. You got quite a bit in there. You can just about live on eggs. I mean, seriously, if you really wanted to. Interestingly enough. The only thing that it's like completely bereft of is vitamin C, I believe. Like you're not getting any from eggs. It's not like there's just a tiny sliver. No, there's none. There's none in eggs. So you'd have to supplement with vitamin C. Or just, not eat strictly eggs. But yeah, so yeah, quite a bit in there. Oh, it also has fluorine. Interesting. Oh no. No, it's a tiny bit. It's a tiny bit. A tiny bit's not going to harm you. So therefore, we should just be drinking, all of it, a ton of it from tap water and all that, along with, like antidepressants and pharmaceuticals that end up in the water supply too. Yeah. Tee. Anyway, yeah, the tiny bit, if it's found in eggs, I mean, I'm not really worried about that.
Super healthy and good for us.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that is based on a flawed line of logic, I believe, Glucose Goddess. Just because something has minerals and vitamins in it doesn't mean it's good for you. That's not a good thing to say. It's not really logical, okay? Because that also indicates that the more nutrition, the better, always. Irrespective of what comes alongside that, and also irrespective of whether the amount that's in there can cause toxicity and is incongruous with the nutrient profile that we would have genotypically withstood throughout history. So that's not why they're good for us. Again, good for you. I don't like that vapid language. I like indicated or contraindicated according to the Darwinian principles of evolution. What we're talking about is not whether something is just generally good for you or generally bad for you. What we're talking about is a spectrum of deviation. Here's the ideal. How much do we deviate? It looks like a little it's like a visual it's like a visualization of a probability distribution. If you've ever seen, if you're of the erudite type, you see that the Bohr model of an atom, which is just inaccurate, although it does serve useful whenever you're introducing someone to the concept, which is why it's still used, and I think it should be, at least for very introductory lessons. What they actually look like is it looks like it's a probability distribution. It's a sort of a probability density function, but when they visualize it, or when they not graph it out, because it's not a graph, but when they convey that through imagery, you'll see an atom, and it'll be like really black in the center near the nucleus, and then as you go farther out in the sort of valences, you'll see the electrons are less likely. The image gets lighter and lighter. It's the same thing here. The center is the most indicated approach, and then there's a spectrum of indication. It's a continuous function. It's not discrete. I mean, there you go. There you go. And that's what we should be thinking about, not just, is it good or is it bad, and also based on flawed metrics in the first place. And that's what I think. That's a major thing. That's a major reason why I stand out from the mainstream health space. So
Have lots of nutrients that are beneficial, and eggs can be part of a healthy diet.
Yep. And healthy, really, we shouldn't be looking at healthy. We should be looking at indicated, because if you're trying to scientifically inform upon what is healthy and what is not healthy, you would have to provide evidence that the diet itself was causally associated with the amelioration of hard health outcomes that are negative in human beings, because health is the absence of disease process. So No, indicated according to the Darwinian principles of evolution. Done.
The same is true of oatmeal, by the way.
No, it isn't, Gil. It can be part of a diet that people that are typically presenting with good health consume. So it can be part of a diet that is like that, if that's what you mean. It doesn't mean that you should be consuming it, and it doesn't mean it's appropriate to be consuming for human beings across our genome. So across the board, yes, blanket statement, Gil.
Long list of nutrients.
And also anti-nutrients and plant toxins. So not just anti-nutrients, literal toxins. Okay? Some of which are actually both fiber, oxalates.
Vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients.
Phytonutrients is a buzz term that means nothing. Nutrients that are in plants. Yeah, like you can't get those in far more bioavailable forms in meat. And oftentimes in higher absolute amounts. What about all the vitamins and minerals that actually aren't in plants? Let alone bioavailability. Let's just talk about the absolute amount. Okay, what are all the things that are in plants that we don't need and are actually above a certain amount? Contraindicated. Once again, come on. For your own sake. I'm giving you a hard time. I'm messing around. But, nevertheless, this matters. This matters, Gil, and it's myopic to look at, well, this thing has, I don't know, folate in it. Therefore, like, no, that's not how things work. Okay? Twinkies have some vitamins and minerals in them too. And Twinkies can also be a part of a healthy diet. If by healthy diet, once again, you mean what I think you mean, which is, yeah, someone that doesn't present with any disease processes and is typically presented and perceived as, fit, they can eat those. They can fit that into their diet if they want to. Yeah, that's a really weak definition, isn't it? That's silly and stupid and wrong. So anyway.
And oats can be a part of a healthy diet.
Yeah, well, we already covered that, didn't we? We already covered that. So.
Exactly, same logic.
Well, same flawed logic. Unbelievable, the lack of critical thinking that goes on here. When these people have the capacity to engage with it. They do. I'm rooting for you, Gil. If you think this is destructive criticism, let me tell you, someone that wanted to destroy you with his criticism would be telling you that you're worthless and you'll never be on my level or something, or you'll never be what you want to be and what you perceive yourself to be. No, I'm telling you, you can. But you need to approach this with intellectual honesty, with full understanding of statistics, data analysis, evolutionary biology, biochemistry, elements of cardiovascular pathophysiology, comparative anatomy, a bit, very little is required, and an understanding of epistemology and logic. And I mean formal logic, not informal, like the informal term logic, like reasoning. And so I mean like the formal study. And you need to learn how to not only understand the abstract of all of that, but actually learn how to turn the abstract into the practical. Make the skeleton have flesh. So, all right.
The belief.
Commercial break.
Time for a quick break to tell you about the supplement I have developed.
She's selling some supplement.
Okay, so there's a reason that you put this in, and that's great. We can both criticize this. So she's got what's considered an anti-spike formula, an anti-glucose spike. Ridiculous. Stop. If you want to make money, go ahead and sell something that's actually useful. Like, I don't know, Cerule Products. I don't even have their flagship product on the screen right now, or on my desk. I should, because that's the most important one. The ones that, you can't really you can't really get the effect that those are purported to have, and I believe do have, from your diet or by eliminating something from your diet. They're enhancers that are optional to take. Okay, that's different. By the way, if you haven't gotten your hands on that, link in the description below for a link that will allow you to get a permanent percentage discount and permanent free shipping when signing up for monthly deliveries. And also, if you email me behind the scenes at edgoki@pm.me, I can tell you to earn the products for free. Free of charge, which is what I've been doing for, well, going on about a year now. Maybe a little over. Actually, I believe it's over a year for sure. Yeah, so consider that. But an anti-spike formula is silly because, well, why don't you just tell people to cut the sugar out of their diet that's causing the spikes in the first place? That's interesting. Also, what is the mechanism by which this product is purported to inhibit a spike? Is it actually something that actively interferes with the body in a way that's, dare I say, contraindicated? Dare I say again? Because I would suspect, yes, considering I think that supplement has berberine in it and a bunch of other compounds that are in certain amounts and certain ratios that I think might sabotage the body in a way. Could be wrong. Not sure, but stop selling anti-spike formula to justify people's addictions to carbohydrates. Come on, Glucose Goddess. You could do better too. I'm rooting for you as well. Imagine if these people came to the carnivore side. Now, you might say, well, we don't want them because they'll actually make it worse. Because even if they shifted to the carnivore side, well, they would taint it. They would besmirch the name because of the lack of logic thereof and all that. Like, okay, that's a good argument. However, that assumes that they would just arbitrarily, with their own tools in their toolbox, come to carnivore. But if we gave them our toolbox, and that's why they came over to carnivore, it wouldn't be a worry. It wouldn't be an issue because then they would have already learned the proper logic and all that stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Could you imagine? We can make this movement stronger. Just waiting for them. This is not destructive. This is constructive. And we're having a good time today. We're having fun. I am. I don't know about you. I am. But okay, let's get going. Let's get going.
Now listen, in my years of research, I've understood one key thing. Keeping our glucose levels steady is the foundation of physical and mental health. No question.
Actually, I got lots of questions because that's not true at all.
No, okay. All right. So now Gil is telling us that preventing glucose spikes, especially on a multitude of bases in a given day, so multiple times in a day, is not at least a foundation of health. Really, he's saying no, that's not true at all. First of all, it's an opinion, and we covered that in the beginning. But I think, to be specific, he's talking about her claim about it being the foundation. In which case, I think there's more credence that we can offer to his objection here. But the main reason that I wanted to pause here is research. Has she actually researched? I don't know. I'm not doubting. I didn't know that, though. I think she was a biochemist, which means that she did some research in biochemistry, like the cell biology department, which isn't the same as doing health science research, which also comes with its limitations and problems, but nevertheless.
I mean, that's not even close.
Okay. Well, again, that's your opinion, and now we're going to really strongly disagree. So you're going to tell me that spiking glucose regularly is somehow not a foundation of disease, actually, because it's I forgot. Speaking of logic, I forgot the terms. Negation. It's not the negation. It's also not the contrapositive. It's either the inverse or the converse. I can't remember.
Changes of glucose over the course of the day are completely normal.
There's that word normal again, Gil. So being fat is normal, Gil. Being diseased and ridden with, autoimmunity and all that, that's normal. So should we also exhibit that pattern and things that lead to such patterns because it's normal? Because normal's good. Normal be good. No. No. What is indicated and what is not? Okay. Let's answer this question. Let's just go through this line of logic. Okay. How often were we spiking our glucose throughout our ancestry? For the most sufficient amount, for the most recent amount of time, sufficient to have caused full genotypic adaptations to our genome. Okay, that's what matters. Okay, the answer is extremely rarely. Even during the agricultural revolution, that wasn't ostensibly a very frequent phenomenon. And even if it were, that was 13,000 years. Food also wasn't as abundant, and so they didn't eat as frequently, and their meals were not filled with as much mass. There was more fiber in those meals necessarily because things weren't as ultra processed. There's many factors that could have led these people to not be fat despite spiking their glucose, even if they were regularly, that's what I'm trying to say here. But it doesn't seem that we were, and before that point, the only time that we would have been doing that was during a time where we encountered a beehive that we decided to, take down and eat. So, no, that didn't happen. And what are glucose spikes often followed by? Are they often followed by reactive hypoglycemia, which actually is indicative of a poisoning having occurred, or a toxic level of something being introduced into the body having occurred? Even if on that small scale in isolation, it's very minimally problematic, okay, because we are designed to have a spike and then a drop back down. It was a toxic load, but it's not like it's actually going to kill you. Even if you did that for a month, 3 times a day. But I'll tell you what, I would predict that you would be starting to notice a lot of things happening if you're doing that. Can you draw a causal distinction between the glucose spike being the problem? No, because in order to spike your glucose, you're also having to consume something or a bunch of other things on a regular basis that have a lot of other things in there. You've introduced like 12 different confounders doing that. But which is the strongest factor? Well, I guess it's up for the individual to decide based on their experiences, but I would suspect that the glucose spiking isn't the last thing on the list. So anyway, Gil, fluctuations is actually not really what she's talking about anyway. Fluctuations is a broader term and it's far more vague, and I think it's in order to protect yourself from the amount of criticism that you are not exactly anticipating eagerly, at the very least. So, we're talking about spikes, and that's what she's talking about, which is why her formula is called anti-spike formula, not anti-fluctuation formula. Okay, Gil? Fluctuations are normal, and you have fluctuations whenever you're not consuming carbohydrates. So I don't really know what your point is. So, okay, cool.
Physiological.
Yeah, it is physiological, Gil. Is that actually what he just said? Come on.
Course of the day are completely normal, completely physiological.
Yeah, they're physiological. Well, yes, they are. Indeed, they are. Yes. A spike in glucose is physiological. Yes, Gil. Tell it. Yes. Good. Okay. All right. Let's continue.
And completely healthy. You could take...
No. So, no, that's not true. What the hell are you talking about? When you spike your glucose, which is actually what she's talking about, Gil, that is causing damage, which is why the spike goes right back down very quickly, oftentimes below your baseline, because it's toxic. So literally by definition, it is not healthy. Gil, no. If you mean fluctuation, which therefore would mean that you're misrepresenting her actual argument, and you're better than that. You just mean, I don't know, your glucose goes up when you need it through gluconeogenesis. Like when I'm twitching a bunch of muscles and I'm engaging in high intensity exercise or activity. Well, then obviously it's healthy. If by healthy you mean a function of a properly functioning system operating at its indicated level. That's not the point. They're not indicated for your physiology. We're done. Tell me how frequently. I mean, seriously. This is something to really, really consider. I'm serious. It helps to. It's just another piece to the puzzle that helps you put things together. Not fully. This is just one piece, but still. How often do you actually encounter simple carbohydrates in nature, in terrestrial nature, even aquatic nature? Seriously. Extremely rarely. So how could it have been the case that we evolved to eat hundreds of grams of it a day? Riddle me that. Riddle me that. Seriously. Now, I love nuance and I'm not intellectually dishonest. Okay? I'm actually biased towards nuance. I'm biased towards disproving my arguments, or at least trying to do so as much as possible to get the strongest ones. And so there is an argument you can make in response to that. There is one, and it's valid. It's a valid response, which is, okay, yeah, but we're not every other animal on the face of the planet. What did we do 13,000 years ago? Well, we started cultivating plants. We did. And they had carbohydrates in them. And we ate those plants. Right. Good. Now. Is 13,000 years long enough to have caused us to have a requirement for them? Is it long enough to have caused them to caused a slight amount of them or a small amount of them to be indicated for us to have to be consuming on a daily basis? Well, I put forth a theory that could be the case in very specific individuals last year, I think. No, it was this year. It was early this year. And I got a bunch of flack for it. Well, you know what? No, I didn't. I didn't get a lot of flack for it. I got like 2 people saying that, sure. The majority of people absolutely lost their minds in the opposite direction. They saw that video and went, oh my God, Eddie, I'm so glad that you come around to our side. I eat hundreds of grams a day and I feel so great. And I go, whoa, hold up. That's not what I'm saying. Oh my God, I eat like hundreds of grams a day. I've been on the sugar diet and I just feel so much better. I'm so glad that you come around to my way of thinking. I'm so... No, that's not what I said. In fact, I actually said that it was like 20 grams maximum could be something that you could like consider doing. And great. But since then, I think I've actually gone right back to being as vehement as possible with the zero carbohydrate train, because I think most people that I was referring to had just severe metabolic damage that required them to take it as a drug for the rest of their life in small amounts. So like that's not the same thing as it being indicated in our physiology. That's just not, that's not how that works. Not to mention that well, our efficiency for gluconeogenesis is still extremely high, and there's no evidence of people requiring. I mean, it's all the same arguments I've already given, frankly. I'm trying to save us time. But yeah. Anyway, Gil, let's not lose sight of why we paused this video, which is that he said that glucose fluctuations are healthy, which if he means spikes by fluctuations, that's just completely nonsensical.
The healthiest person on the planet, 20-year-old Olympic medalist, right? On the healthiest diet possible. Him.
Well, according to whom, on the basis of what? What is that? What is that? Because when you start talking about healthiest diet, you're just going to have an opinion about what that is based on flawed data. Flawed logic, really. Data itself is not flawed. It just is. data, like, you know.
And you'd see their glucose fluctuate, oscillate, go up and down over the course of the day. It goes up.
Right. Okay. So is that necessarily a good thing? Right. So you've also got error. Wait a minute. That looks like you've got error bars there. Hold on. Let me. Not trying to hide anything from you. So that's the signal, and then here's your noise. Okay. Why is there that much noise around that signal? Unless this would. No. Why? What is this graph from? Glucose changes in young, healthy individuals. Ah, that's why. I thought this was one person because he mentioned like a 20-year-old person. And I was like, why are there error bars when you have data for one person? Like that would just tell you that the measurement was so off that they had to have error bars for it because it was an estimation, which means it was probably based on a regression sum with an error around it as a result. But no, this is multiple people. What was the sample? We're going to ask the same damn questions. What was the sample size and the subsequent statistical power? Did this achieve statistical significance, while also keeping in mind that statistical significance does not necessarily confer practical significance in the real world? Okay. What was the signal to noise ratio? We're already getting an image of that here. So basically, this data point here, right? That's about what, 105 or so, plus or minus. Well, wow, plus or minus. You get the thing here. So what? It'd be like right there. So 150. So it could have been 105 or 150, and then all the way down to, I don't know, about what, 70? No, that's not 70. That's about 73 or so. So yeah, and if we're talking about a standard deviation here, it better not be a standard error. I'll be pissed. Let's just assume that it's standard deviation. We're talking about, in this descriptive statistics study, 68% of the data in that part of the graph could have been between 73 or 150. 73 or 150. Right. That's the noise. Well, once again, we've got 100, looks like 107 or so. 107.5. I love doing this stuff. Just to show you. 107.5 here. Okay, cool. And we'll make it negative, and we'll add it to, because that's the same thing as taking the positive number and subtracting from that 107.5. We'll add it to 150. Okay. So 107.5 plus or minus about 42.5. Right. Okay. So 107.5 divided by 42.5 is 2.53, which in this context is not a strong enough signal. Usually I go for about 5. So cool. I mean, 2 is the minimum that you want to go for, but holy shit. In this context, are you kidding me? It depends on the context always. What the hell is this, Gil? Way too much noise. And what was the sample size? I would suspect quite low given the signal to noise ratio that we see there. Okay? Unbelievable. Unbelievable here, Gil. And this was over the course of a day? And they ate 3 meals. So is that indicated? Is that indicated? No. The answer is no. It's not indicated. Okay? We're done. So we're going to take that off the screen and we're going to officially play it. Okay? Cool.
Intense exercise. It goes up with all kinds of healthy foods.
No, not healthy foods, because if they're spiking your glucose, then it's not a healthy food in terms of what is indicated. Like I thought we covered this, Gil. And we have. Also, yes, of course it will fluctuate with exercise because your demand for glucose goes up during high intensity exercise. Even low intensity exercise sometimes. Just less so. Okay? That's how that works. Do you know muscle energetics? Do you know how muscles work? Tell us all about that, Gil. Love to hear it.
So this idea, I've never seen someone actually draw a straight line on the screen to suggest this idea that you're going to keep your glucose flat.
All right, so Gil, basically evading the point again and being deliberately obtuse in a flagrant, offensive way, frankly, dishonest way. She's talking about spikes, Gil. Spikes. Stability doesn't mean never going up ever. It means in normal circumstances at rest. Do you want it spiking? No. That's what she's talking about. Okay, Gil? Come on, brother. You can do better. He ain't doing too well.
It's a very damaging idea because this telegraphs to the public that changes in glucose going up and down after a meal or after exercise or after an activity.
Okay, you notice how none of those are the same thing at all? So your glucose going up after a meal, first of all, that doesn't mean spiking. There's a difference. All right? That doesn't mean spiking. Like that's not... Anyway, cool. So yeah, it doesn't mean spiking at all. Going up, well, glucose does go up after a meal, even if you don't eat carbs. So you're not going to avoid that, really, unless you eat strictly fat. And even then, it'll probably still go up at least a tiny bit. And that's not good either, because that means you're not getting enough insulin, which you require in certain amounts. So yeah, Gil, no. Not to mention, once again, my original point. Eating is not the same as exercising. If you have a glucose spike during an exercise, well, that was indicated to have occurred. You know how I know that? Because that glucose came from your liver. Your body created it, according to the genes and the environment in which you placed them. Those genes having evolved for millions of years under positive and negative selection pressures in our genome and proto-humans, if you include, and proto-humans that precede our current speciation. Homo sapiens sapien. So, no. Gil, come on.
Is problematic. This is...
Well, depending on the context, it is problematic. It's not indicated.
Get people terrified of eating a piece of fruit.
Terrified? No. What it's going to let people understand is that in order to live intentionally, you have to avoid things like that sometimes. Most of the time. There's a difference between being afraid of something and then living intentionally. We're not trying to stoke fear. We're trying to alert people of things for their own benefit so that they can live intentionally. That is what we're doing, Gil.
Asking, should I be eating sticks of butter and bacon because that keeps my glucose flat?
Well, when did she say that? So now what you've done is you've engaged in the straw man fallacy. Rarely do I actually bring that up because for some reason, I guess it's not really, either I don't identify it when it happens and call it out by name, invoke it, or it just isn't very frequent compared to all the other fallacies I see. But that's what you did. That's what you did there. Gid there, Dill. That's what you did there, Gil. No one's saying that you should eat sticks of butter. Most of the time, whenever you see people eating sticks of butter, they're saying, this is what I do. I'd recommend eating a few bites or so if you have a craving or something like that. They're not actively telling you to eat sticks of butter. Now, you might find one or two. Is that representative of the whole? You could engage in a composition fallacy there? What is true of parts is true of the whole. Because that would that would be interesting, considering the fact that you understand that that's a fallacy when people start to point to anecdotes. Uh-oh. Look, we all make contradictions sometimes, but it's important to point those out because, well, if there's logical contradiction, you're being hypocritical, and hypocrisy is not good. It ain't no good.
Complete misunderstanding of physiology.
Tell us all about misunderstanding physiology. Tell us all about physiology, Gil. Tell us all about physiology. No, really, Gil. Tell us all about physiology. Because I'm sure that you understand biochemistry. Anyway, I would have loved to have you in my early access program for my biochemistry course that I'm actually building with the information I've learned over the course of years upon years of studying this. So that we could hear your feedback for comedy purposes.
Nutrition of health. Changes of glucose are completely normal, just like changes in blood pressure, heart rate.
Not all changes are the same. Glucose, or I call them glucose. Hell, man. I've been saying glucose all day. And by all day, I mean like for the last hour. Hey, glucose, stop eating Gil. Anyway, not all changes are the same, Gil. Okay? And context matters as to when the changes occur. You do realize this, right? I know he does. Again, that's where I and others differ. I'm being forgiving towards you, Gil. I'm rooting for you to be correct. That is no. No, man. I know that you know what I'm saying to be true. There is nuance here. But you are being ideological in order to reinforce your own positions in your head, probably by my estimation due to insecurity of being wrong, especially given your level of notoriety. Because that makes it even more threatening, especially when you've built a business model under it. Okay, it can be threatening, and for good reason, but it doesn't mean to sacrifice the ethics, okay?
And so many other parameters.
And if I could only take one supplement for the rest of my life.
Also, I'm sorry, Gil, you said blood pressure fluctuations are healthy as well. That also depends on context, does it not? So after you eat, your blood pressure typically lowers. That's normal. That's indicated, rather. Your blood pressure goes up during exercise. You induce injury to muscle tissue. You also induce injury to your arteries because of the higher blood pressure, which heals rapidly, because that type of increase in blood pressure and damage to arteries is actually appropriate. That's supposed to happen. Okay? What isn't indicated is having your blood pressure go extremely high after meals, having it go way too low. Okay, you see, you do understand that not all fluctuations are the same. I know that you do, because even an idiot, even a child, would understand this. All right? So, same premise there. But okay, she's about to say, she's been saying, if I had to take one supplement for the rest of my life, right? Okay, here we go. It's gonna be her supplement.
It's the one you sell.
Keep my glucose level.
Yes, no shit, Gil. I hate that argument. Let me guess. You're gonna sell me let me guess. The supplements you take are the ones you sell. It's the supplements that you are gonna say that you support are the ones you sell. Duh. Because that's why I'm selling them. Duh. What are you talking about? The overwhelming cynicism in that statement is teeming with associated ignorance. Let me guess, it's the one you sell. Oh, got her! Oh, shit! Duh. Anyway, okay, whatever. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that point.
It would be anti-spike formula.
Shocker.
It's not shocking, Gil. Guess what? People sell things that they actually support. Instead of talking about how she sells a supplement and that's what makes it bad and that she's she sells a supplement. Instead, investigate the integrity behind the product and their claims, which is what I did.
More GLP-1 means healthier glucose.
Okay, this just goes.
Well, okay. This gets to a point where this is all of human nutrition science. This value of this is like associated with the best health outcomes of the people studied. So? What? The amount of confounders and the amount of noise it's just, everything is uninformative. How about you exhibit GLP-1 levels that are exhibited by your body when you eat the foods we're designed to eat? Forget the level. It doesn't matter. Not to mention, by the way, protein and fat themselves, all of these things, and carbs, by the way, stimulate GLP-1. So what's your point? Come on, ma'am. I'm rooting for you.
Forever. The ad is longer than the video itself.
That's a problem if you're not being hyperbolic. However, I unfortunately, I think you're right, because I'm pretty sure that I reacted to a video of hers last year that was on this same set. I think it was over a year ago at this point. Definitely was. You can check out one of my old videos. The quality's improved. So anyway, okay, cool.
Take a look at the sales page to see what this supplement actually is. Okay, so I just took a look at the sales page for this. There's no
Why didn't you show it? There's no what?
trial on this supplement.
No trial on the supplement. Okay. And I'll tell you why that doesn't matter. Because these clinical trials don't mean anything. I mean, at least Cerule, Cerule does have a trial of their own. Although it was a pilot study, and it was done on 12 people. Granted, the signal was pretty strong, actually. Even within 12 people. But there's a bunch of composite, it's a composite inference when it comes to the product itself and why I believe in it. But they do have a trial. If this one doesn't have a trial, I mean, you could say, okay, well, that means that it's like really, really bad and all that. However, I'm sure that the formula was put together with ingredients that have been tested in trials before. So, I mean, just to play devil's advocate here. The point still stands, though. None of this actually matters. Stop eating carbs if you don't want a glucose spike. We're done.
It's never been tested, right? They just
Tell us all about data and clinical trials that you totally know the limitations of and totally report the limitations of in your language. No, he doesn't.
took a bunch of things that already exist, a bunch of different supplements, existing supplements, that have some evidence for them, some better
Right. So that's probably what it was. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
than others, and they jumbled them together. And they
Yeah. Okay. So cool. That's I wouldn't if I formulated a product, I personally wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. However, the reason I said so what is because the main point is that you shouldn't be taking the damn supplement to get rid of the glucose spike. And also the clinical trials don't really mean too much on their own.
this has this proprietary thing, but they never tested it. The problem with that is when you mix different molecules, they can interact, they can change their actions reciprocally, right?
Right. So now extrapolate that exact same logic to literally every diet study that you cover, Gil. Every single one. Your bias evinces itself as you speak and criticize. It's obvious, Gil. Does he have some Sicilian in him, by the way? He looks Sicilian.
You can have actions that you see when they're alone may go away, may change. They can
Yeah. Now also apply this logic to the GI scale. which I'm pretty sure that you've also invoked on multiple occasions. You know that scale that's based on extremely high signal to noise rate, or sorry, extremely low signal to noise ratios to the degree that the noise actually swamps the signal because of extremely low sample sizes. You know that scale that actually fluctuates even has more noise than signal with respect to the signal you're actually looking for, the GI level that is resulted, or the glucose level that results from the consumption of the food, the concerned food, in one individual, even just one person, because it depends on the time of day, it depends on what they've done that day, what they haven't done that day, how much sleep they got that day, whether they're menstruating, if they're a female. That scale, extrapolate that logic to that too. And then you'll see that basically all of human nutrition science is that. It means nothing, Gil. Nothing at all. If you're in a field that actually has to depend on statistics, politics is a big one in that respect, well, then different story. Engineering, then yes, you do have to get into the numbers and you have to throw out a bunch of theories because it's all you have, because we're humans and we're fallible. You're dealing with a field wherein you have something better, many things that are better than that. And you're not contending with them because you think that's not as scientific as statistics, because statistics is numbers and numbers are scientific. They're associated with sophistication. Buddy, I understand statistics quite well. And I can tell you, Gil, I can tell you right now, it is a load of shit when it comes to this field. All right? You can manipulate statistics so easily, so easily. There are lies, damned lies, and statistics. Mark Twain. Very famous quote from him. Infamous quote. I gotta tell you, he didn't pull that out of his hole, okay? It actually meant something, and this is what he was talking about.
New effects that you didn't see when the molecules are alone. You can have side effects.
Yes, exactly. So this is another, yes, great. You're bringing up a good point here, Gil. Good.
Happen with supplements all the time. It's not rare. Don't fall for the idea that because a supplement is natural, it has to be completely safe. Nothing bad can ever happen. That's
Well, good thing that you put natural in quotes, because literally every single thing is natural because it's part of nature and it's a function of us being natural beings creating things. This phone is natural. This, dare I show it? No, I don't. Here. This battery. This battery's natural. This pencil's natural. Okay? All of it's natural. So it gets into a distinction of well, where's the line by which things are not things that we should be engaging with or consuming or whatever. Honestly, that's inferred through trial and error. Humans are really good at adapting to things. Very good at adapting. This gets inexorably to a conservatism versus progressivism argument. In this context, I don't mean in the overall political context. Don't I know alarm bells are going off. I mean literally, I mean the technical terms, conservatism, progressivism in this context. Obviously, if you're carnivore and you're a believer in the ancestral consistency lifestyle when it comes to it, at the very least, what you eat, well then you're more on the conservative side in that respect. And that's what we're like in that respect on the in this space. So anyway,
at all. Side effects happen with supplements, including sometimes severe side effects, liver toxicity and other problems.
Yeah. Tell us all about liver toxicity and how things like black pepper can actually cause that by the compound of piperine and inhibiting detox pathways, particularly stage 2 detox pathways in the liver. Talk about how curcumin is actually inhibited from being excreted by the liver when you consume piperine because of that inhibition of the detox pathway, indicating that curcumin is not something that you should be consuming because your body recognizes it as toxic, because that's why it's trying to excrete it even in tiny amounts when you consume it in tiny amounts. Tell us all about that, Gil. Yes, supplements can be toxic. That's an example of one right there. Anyway, cool. Good.
Recommend buying any supplement that hasn't been directly tested. This is
I don't recommend purchasing or taking any supplement at all, actually, unless you have a severe physical problem that requires you to do such a thing. Instead, just acquire all of your nutrition from, animal products, particularly ruminant meat. We're done.
a common game. So you take things that already exist, you mix them together, and you create this proprietary mix, and you sell it with a huge markup, right? Because only you sell this thing. But then you never actually test it. You have to show that it's effective, that it's safe.
Well, now you've just used the word effective. And if you actually know about epistemology, you'd understand that effect is the conjugate of cause. And none of that science can inform upon causality, which means it can't inform upon efficacy either, technically speaking. None of those studies can. Efficacy is an opinion asserted by people that are trusted by individuals to interpret the data that is collected in the way that it's collected, in the methodology that was employed. With the amount of studies conducted to attempt reproducibility and reproduction and repeatability of results into an aggregate strong signal to noise ratio. Okay? Efficacy can't be informed upon, so you can't prove efficacy. I just did a video on this with respect to the Ozempic scandals that are going on now. People coming down with blindness and stomach paralysis. I actually pointed out, I said, listen, a lot of it is actually not the FDA's fault. And the Novo Nordisk's fault. Some of it very well could be. I don't know all the details. A lot of it could be, even perhaps the majority. But from what I heard, it wasn't the majority their fault. They can't inform upon efficacy, so you're always taking a risk when you take these drugs. Always. The FDA is not exempt. They're not omniscient. They can't. They are still subject to the same limitations that the science has.
Otherwise, you're using your followers as guinea pigs.
I take
Well, we're all guinea pigs. Always. Even if clinical trials were done on that supplement. Gil?
capsules of anti-spike formula every single day before.
Does she have diabetes?
Highest in carbs and sugars. So.
Well, that also doesn't matter, Gil. That was a horrible response. She's giving you layup after layup after layup, and you're fumbling. Wait a minute. Layup, fumble. Okay. Anyway. Gil. What you should have responded with, actually, was, why don't you just cut the carbs out? But of course you wouldn't say that because carbs are yummy and also they're super healthy, apparently. Also, you're Sicilian, it seems. So if you're of like Italian descent, you're either super on the pasta side and the bread side, or you're on the hard meats and cheeses side, I've noticed. I've noticed that it doesn't seem to be a mix of both. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, enlighten me if you think so. But he might trend on the former side, I think, if he's Sicilian. Let's get going further. Can't wait to hear more of her claims because I think the ad's over.
Go to anti.
Or is she just hawking this for everyone? I think she's just trying to sell this to everyone, even if you don't have blood sugar problems. So this is
right. Well, that's another problem here. But even, oh my God, this isn't a good argument. This isn't a good response. Her position is that glucose spikes are bad, even if you don't have diabetes. Correct. But her position is also, instead of cutting out the glucose, which causes the spikes, because glucose is your primary energy source and your body prefers it, which she says all the time because she doesn't understand actual physiology and biochemistry and evolutionary biology. Then what she says is, well, if you're going to eat, like she just said, if you're going to eat a carb-heavy meal, well, take these supplements. Yes, And I think that now she has vested interest that is actually unethical.
So the sales pitch here is kind of amazing. Take this pill that's never been tested to suppress a completely normal, completely physiological process.
Well, we covered that, Gil. Okay. So we're done with that.
What? This is like saying, here's a pill that I've never tested, by the way, to keep your blood pressure or your heart rate flat all day. If you go to...
Nope, that is not the same thing. She's talking about anti-spiking, Gil. Again, being deliberately obtuse, missing the point. I really hope it's not due to your ignorance. I just said, you're better than that. I hope that I'm right. Please prove me right.
If you get excited over the course of the day, if you go up a flight of stairs, if you have sex and your blood pressure changes, your heart rate changes, nope.
Come on, bro, you didn't have to bring that up.
I don't want that. Take
Are you having sex?
untested pill to suppress a completely normal physiological function. It's in...
Well, we already covered the whole normal physiological function thing. Again, we covered it.
Insanity. She told me I want my glucose flat all day, which is not true at all.
Well, that's not what she said, actually, at all. Gil, you spent 7 minutes of your video talking about something she did not say.
Don't worry. She's now selling me a pill to do that, to solve the problem.
Which is stupid. 2 things can be true at once. 4 things can be true at once.
She just created. See how that works? This doesn't mean everything she says is BS. You guys sent me some of the memes.
Tell us all about who is spewing BS and all that. All right, well, hold on a minute. You sent me this meme. So apparently, fans of his sent him a meme. Let's look at this. Pasta first, broccoli second. Yep, broccoli first, pasta second. Cool. So can you actually get an even lower rise in glucose by not eating the pasta or the broccoli? Yes. Okay, well, I think we're done. So no point in looking at this. Waste of time.
The food order stuff, right? Eat your veggies and your protein before your carbs.
Yeah, don't eat your vegetables at all because vegetables are contraindicated for human consumption. Most of them, 99% of them in supermarkets, including fruit, by the way, are effectively human man-made inventions. Most of those didn't actually exist as their own species, or I mean, not really species, but their own organism. Okay? And if they did, they've been massively hybridized to they exist in perverted forms. Even just compared to like their equivalent form 200 years ago. All right? They're teeming with, in the case of fruit, I mean, they're far starchier in the case of like bananas and stuff. But in the case of vegetables, we're talking about like sweet potatoes and plantains and all that. And regular potatoes, far starchier, far sweeter, less replete with fiber, which I guess is almost a silver lining in a way, because you don't want fiber either. But they're far bigger as well. They're far sweeter, so there's not just more absolute sugar content. It seems to be more fructose as well. And they're also available year-round and sprayed with a bunch of herbicides and pesticides. So, good, great. Yeah. What we've done is we've made them less immediately toxic in the case of vegetables. Doesn't mean they're not toxic. And by less immediately toxic, they're still immediately toxic. They just don't kill you upon consumption like literally all of them did before we hybridized them, which should tell you something. Hybridization started when? Well, roughly 13,000 years ago. Why do you think we were soaking beans? To get rid of a lot of the problems with beans. Why did we peel tomatoes? Why do people in other countries still peel tomatoes and peel potatoes and then cook them to shit? They know. Or at least they knew. Now it's just tradition. We don't even remember why we're doing it, but we do it. That's why it's important to always inculcate and instill the tradition into people, but not just the tradition. That's not my point. The reasons that underpin the tradition. Okay? Or else people are just going to question it and then go, this is stupid, and then tear themselves apart. You know, what got you here, right? Remember what got you here and why. Because if you don't, then you're basically doing the same thing that everyone in Western society is today, which is basically taking a bunch of flowers from the ground, pull them up from the roots, put them in a vase, and then expect them to live forever. Nope, you're slowly wilting away. Okay?
Before your rice, stuff like that. Yeah, those are based on solid science. There's studies to back that up.
Oh God, forget the things I want to say. I'll just stick to the main point, which is stop eating your vegetables and your pasta. Don't eat carbs. Don't eat fiber. We're done, Gil.
And those can be helpful for people who have trouble controlling their blood sugar, people with.
Oh my God, so you're also still missing the point. It doesn't matter if someone is having trouble with blood sugar control and keeping a steady baseline. Spikes are not good to be exhibiting, even in someone like me.
With prediabetes. So yeah, use those things if they help you.
Or don't.
But this stuff, scaremongering over changes in glucose that are completely normal, healthy.
No, okay, so we covered normal, we covered healthy, we're done, Gil. Come on.
Person should be worried about it and take an untested pill.
No, that's your opinion.
Scared of oats. This is
No, so again, conflating fear with intention. Covered that too. I think we covered everything. Wow. And yet, we're 8 minutes into a 44-minute and 13-second video.
Nonsense.
Cholesterol is a molecule in our body that is essential to life. It creates our cell membranes, and we are composed of trillions of cells. If we didn't have proper cell membranes, our body would not be able to exist, to survive. We would not be alive.
Cholesterol also makes up the backbone of 5 major hormone groups, including mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, androgens. There's 2 others that I can't think of at the top of my head. That includes things like testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, cortisol, you know, all those. Cholesterol is what makes up the myelin sheathing on your neurons. I think it's about 20% of the brain as well. Makes up, 40 to 50% of every cell membrane in your body. Seems to be, it's helpful in immune signaling, immune response, immune system signaling. Yeah, it's very important. That logic doesn't mean that you should be consuming it, though. There's other arguments that you need to rely on because that's not sufficient. Because we could talk about all the beauties of glucose and how it's utilized in the body, and I talk about it all the time. I did another video called Carb Delusion Exposed, talking about exactly that. How is glucose actually required in the body? What cells require it? How do they use it? And for what reason do they use that instead of fat and all that stuff? It's a ubiquitous fuel source. Doesn't mean you should be consuming it. So that's also why I don't rely on these arguments to prove that we should be consuming cholesterol. It's just to prove that it's actually an important part of our bodies and to maybe consider, could we need it exogenously? So
Essential, also, cholesterol is essential to produce things like hormones. It also creates the
turning that down. Don't blame me, blame her. That's
protective shield around our neurons. It protects our brain cells. Cholesterol is a very, very, very important molecule. And in diseases where people cannot make cholesterol, you see a lot of malformations, a lot of issues with development, with cognitive impairment, and so forth.
Okay, all of that's true. Just be careful with the notion, very common. By the way, she didn't say that. That's not a criticism of her. But you hear this very often on social media. Cholesterol has all these important functions, so why would you want to lower cholesterol level in the blood? Just leave it.
okay. So I was actually expecting him to say, "Oh, therefore you should eat it," because that's the exact thing that I was talking about. But it's very similar. It's similar enough. Yeah. So same. Yeah. Correct. That is not a logically sound. That is not logically sound. There's other reasons why we say sensibly and correctly that you shouldn't really worry about your cholesterol levels. And it doesn't, that's not the argument. So
high. That is medically and physiologically absurd.
oh yes, absurd. Yes, of course it's absurd because cholesterol, as we know, it causes heart disease. Yeah, cholesterol it causes heart disease above a certain threshold, and you got to keep it low because it's going to clog your arteries because it just magically ends up in the arteries according to a concentration gradients when it gets to a high enough concentration through cytosis into the tunica intima. Yeah, that's just how that happens. Yeah, definitely. It's not like the majority of your cholesterol, as we stated in the beginning, is actually produced by the body, and therefore the uptake, the resequestration of it is also regulated by the body intensely. Gil. It's not like every single atherosclerotic plaque in genetically normal people is present within atherosclerotic lesions, which mean damaged arteries. Gil, get the off this train because you have a chance to salvage what let's put it this way. You have a chance, you have an opportunity to redeem yourself. You do. You do. Please take it. I'm rooting for you, man. I am. You still have an opportunity to come out and actually be scientifically literate. All right. And say, you know what? I've been less myopic. I've seen the forest for the trees now. And cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. It's a contributing factor, and it's a primary one, if not, the second primary factor involved. But you can't have the plaque without damage to the arteries. Okay, you can say that because that's actually scientifically sound. All right, we are aware that the most unstable plaques in atherosclerotic plaque are the soft plaques that become unstable and rupture and form blood clots. And we know that those soft plaques are made they're composed primarily of fat deposits and cholesterol deposits. We know that. Okay, it makes up a significant part of that. Look into a fire pyramid, what you actually require for a fire to not only start but persist. Heat, a fuel source, and oxygen. You remove any one of those and the triangle falls apart. You don't have a fire. Okay, heart disease is the fire. And the 3 points, well, I guess you only have 2 here. Cholesterol, fat, all that. That goes in the same category. Damage to arteries. Also, I suppose an immune response, what could be the other one? Wow, I've got a triangle now. Cool. Anyway.
All kinds of molecules that play crucial roles throughout the body, and you don't want the blood levels too high. Glucose.
No, okay, so now what you're basically addressing is the idea that she's made a false dichotomy, and a false dichotomy is a fallacy, hence the name, the false dichotomy. You're either with us or against us. No, you could be somewhere in the middle. Yes, the false dichotomy is a fallacy. However, what you have just said is an example of a false dichotomy. Is, yes, a false dichotomy, logically speaking, but it doesn't mean that since there is a logical fallacy present, that those things are both true that make up the logical fallacy. That's not true. Whatever your cholesterol levels are, total, LDL, HDL, any lipoprotein level or subfraction of lipoproteins, they are all designed to be that level according to your genes. Now, that is not to say that the levels cannot be problematic. But what it is to say is that you should not interfere with that level through non-organic or holistic methods by adding a bunch of negatives instead of just removing negatives. So changing your diet, right? However, the best part about this is that cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease, as I've been saying. This is only in the situation where it hypothetically does, like in a different world. But it doesn't, Michael. Where the hell did that come from? What is happening? Gil. I called him glucose and then Michael. Anyway, cool. So, anyway, let's continue.
Vital throughout the body, and you don't want blood levels too high. Many other examples: sodium, potassium, on and on and on. So just careful about that switcheroo that's very common on social media. Again, that's not a criticism of her, just a general point. By the way, good to realize that cells throughout your body produce their own cholesterol, in your skin, in your muscle, and everywhere. Tip of your nose. Your brain produces its own cholesterol, right? So cholesterol levels inside cells produced by those cells are one world, and then blood level of cholesterol is a different galaxy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's also true. Fun fact.
That's where a lot of times doctors will say, careful about your cholesterol levels. It doesn't mean you're reducing cholesterol everywhere and you're not going to have enough for your brain to function, etc. All right?
The cholesterol
However, there is a massive association between statin-taking populations, statins being involved in reducing cholesterol levels massively, and ALS, an invariably fatal condition, which suggests, well, a failure of myelination and nerve protection. And, well, that suggests that limiting your cholesterol through those means is still going to interfere with cellular function, isn't it? So that argument doesn't really hold up, because there's other examples of this as well. So
does not become the cholesterol in your veins. The scientists found that the liver, our liver, actually produces 80% of the cholesterol that we need.
Well, what I will say is that's dependent on how much you're consuming. There's going to be some error around there. What you should do is you should observe loads of people eating lots of different diets and see what with massively varying cholesterol levels on a very large scale, and then assess the liver's production rate and what the signal to noise ratio is in that respect. What is the mean cholesterol production rate through continuous measurement? Because then what you would find is, okay, is it 80% plus or minus like 50% or something? Or is it 80% plus or minus like 5%? Because if it's only 5%, well, then it really doesn't seem to really matter what you're eating. It always produces that level. But I suspect that it depends a lot on what you're eating, what you're not eating. But I could be wrong. Because even in people that are eating lots of cholesterol, it seems that, well, their liver's still producing the majority of it. But could it be the case that you'll produce a lot less if you're eating a lot of cholesterol, which is found in a carnivore diet? Well, perhaps. So
only 20% of the cholesterol in our body actually comes from eating cholesterol.
Yeah, again, this is a faulty generalization fallacy, though, because you can't extrapolate those results to any other person that wasn't studied.
He's mixing a couple things here. One thing is all the cholesterol in our body, most of that is tucked away in cells, like I said.
Yes, that's also true.
Produced by those same cells, right? Peripheral cells, peripheral tissues. Then we have the blood compartment, cholesterol that circulates.
Yeah, okay, so you're about to say cholesterol that's circulating in the blood. Why is it circulating in the blood? Because it's still being transferred to other tissues, because those tissues still need cholesterol. Cholesterol doesn't just end up in the blood just to have fun and swim around and have a pool party. Okay, that's not what's going on.
In the blood, and there a good chunk comes from the liver. Yeah, the liver makes a lot of cholesterol for that compartment.
Now, why does it do that?
And then a smaller fraction, a smaller chunk comes from diet. In most people, that's true.
And only
In most people that studied, yes. Okay, there we go. Gil sewing parts of responsibility in there. He's not the most offensive figure by any means, but
small fraction of the cholesterol you eat will actually make its way into your body.
So
it seems.
that's true for most people, But then you have about 20, 25, 30% of people.
No, people studied. And also in the studies that you have seen.
Who are so-called hyper absorbers of cholesterol. They just absorb a ton from.
Well, are they hyperabsorbers, or are they eating a different diet that would phenotypically adapt most people to that absorption level? Who is to say other? Like, who knows? Noise, 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 noise.
So we got to be careful with the blanket statements. Again, it's true for most people.
Studied, and or it seems.
Most of the cholesterol you eat is not absorbed. It doesn't end up in your blood. It gets excreted. But we have a substantial number of people for whom this is not true.
That dietary cholesterol, especially from eggs, does not, and I quote, significantly impact blood cholesterol.
She's reading a study, and really she's reading the conclusion. So anytime that you're reading a statistical analysis and it says the word significantly, they are talking about statistical significance. They are not using a value judgment statement that is subjective. Although the statement is still based on an arbitrary cutoff that is subjectively defined, so there's that, but it's a little different, quite different actually. Dietary cholesterol does not significantly impact as a cause and effect statement. So what they should have said is does not seem to significantly impact, because you can't inform upon causality. Blood cholesterol or increase cardiovascular risk. Risk can't be informed upon either. That's a cause and effect statement. For most people, right? So most people studied. Is that a meta-analysis? I would presume that is a meta-analysis because of the way that they phrase that. Most people. What was the signal to noise ratio on the random variables? The primary outcome variables. Did those primary outcome variables necessarily inform upon are those primary outcome variables highly associated with cardiovascular incidence in populations studied? Invariably, to a repeatable degree. What other questions ought we to ask? How many people made up the study? How long did the study go on for? What was the duration of the study? What was the control exerted? Because it wasn't complete control and it wasn't really adequate control at all. We already know that. But was it beyond? Was it far below what control should have at least been exerted and was actually able to be exerted? Who knows?
Or increase cardiovascular risk for most people.
Okay, so the effect of dietary cholesterol, of cholesterol from food, on your blood cholesterol level.
No, the purported effect, because you can't inform upon causality, and therefore you can't inform upon effect. And we just covered that.
Small, it's not zero. It exists, but it's modest. And this has been shown in a gazillion very...
No, it hasn't been shown, because you are drawing a causal relationship or causal inference from an association. You have no idea if it was actually because of dietary cholesterol. Unless you're just referencing an observation that actually was able to measure the amount of cholesterol absorbed from the amount consumed, in which case that's different.
controlled trials. So it looks like this.
Okay, so now we got a graph on the screen, so let's take a look at this too. LDL-C increase in milligrams per deciliter. Okay, so we're also just talking about LDL-C, not total cholesterol levels. Interesting. Change in cholesterol intake. So no, we're not talking about total cholesterol level changes. We're talking about LDL, which is one specific lipoprotein. Cholesterol is carried by many different lipoproteins. Okay? HDL being the other primary one. VLDL and IDL as well. Cool. Change in cholesterol intake in milligrams per day, as measured by what? How long did this study go on for? And what was the population size here? And this is a piss poor linear regression. You know how I know that? Because look at all the clustering here. See that? The residuals are not normally distributed at all, which tells me that this is not adequate at all. This looks very similar to that regression that I analyzed, I don't know, a few months ago on Nick Norwood's study, which was a longitudinal study for a year on 100 people. Bad. Not good. There's a bunch of clustering here. Okay? Bunch of clustering. So not really a good linear regression. all right, you can still make observations based on it, but to do a linear regression and yield an R value and report that as a strength of the association is irresponsible, to say the least. Okay, so what do we got here? Response. Yep. Okay, so it's like there's an asymptotic kind of thing going on here. You got I wouldn't really say curvilinear, but it sort of is. There's a sort of curvilinear relationship here. You've got, oh, what was I going to say? Oh, yes, at the beginning, there seems to be, if you're looking at this like kinetics, like enzyme kinetics, oftentimes what you'll look at, you'll have first order kinetics, so it looks like it's basically following a linear fashion, and then it tapers off to zero order kinetics, where it's the value to the power of 0 instead of the value to the power of 1. You get that relationship here going on. So yeah, basically what this is showing is that if you change your cholesterol intake going up and up and up and up, most people remain under about, well, this threshold here in increases in cholesterol in the form of LDL, which isn't cholesterol. It is a lipoprotein carrier for cholesterol. So it doesn't really inform upon that much. Okay, and then they've got a linear line to show that. And then MM. Yes, okay, and then Hill. All right, whatever. Okay, so we understand what it shows. But again, we don't know the sample size, and we don't know the duration of the study. We don't know what else these people were doing to influence their LDL levels. We don't know what else they were eating. There's a lot of things that we don't know. Okay, that's important to understand.
If you start out with no cholesterol in your diet and you add some, let's say the equivalent of 1 egg, your LDL cholesterol goes up by about 6 or 7 points, average.
All right, no. Okay, so Gil, you are a scientist. You need to be responsible with your reporting. Okay? You need to be responsible. Your LDL cholesterol goes up. Covered that? No. It's LDL, which isn't cholesterol. But the main point that I wanted to actually get to is your cholesterol goes up on average about 6 to 7 points. No, I wasn't in the study, was I, Gil? You cannot extrapolate these results to anyone not studied. Stop saying your. Say, in the people studied for the duration of time they were studied for. Also, an average, really? Well, plus or minus what? What was the signal to noise ratio for this variable? It doesn't look extremely offensive looking at this graph. But, I mean, we've got look at this. We've got an outlier here that also wasn't even removed. Looks like it should have been removed, but potentially not. Potentially not. Sometimes the eyes can be deceiving. Okay. But anyway, okay. Also, let me think about this. Average cholesterol level. Well, was the cholesterol level normally distributed in the population? Was the change in cholesterol, that was the actual random variable, was change, was the LDL-C increase normally distributed? Was it approximately normal? Because if it wasn't, then you shouldn't be reporting an average change in LDL, Gil. You should be reporting a median plus or minus the median average deviation, which then makes things potentially a lot more ambiguous. Or, sorry, a lot more accurate because it depends on the distribution of the random variable concerned. It's a continuous function, not a discrete one, which makes it easier to sort of see it visually without doing a mathematical equation like employing Pearson's second coefficient of skewness. But nevertheless, still something that you should be looking at.
But what's interesting is it plateaus pretty quick, right? So by the time you add a second egg, it goes up less, maybe a couple points. And then by the third, fourth, fifth egg, you barely makes a difference anymore. By the way, same thing has been shown for ApoB, which is a more reliable metric of heart disease risk than...
No, it isn't, because you can't inform upon risk, Gil. We're done with this. And also, we know the hemodynamics. ApoB is a tag on LDL. It does not have any causal role in atherosclerosis. It has an influential role in the heart disease process once there is a lesion that has developed in a genetically normal individual. Okay?
cholesterol or LDL cholesterol. Similar thing. So there's an effect with eggs with dietary...
No, not effect, because it's the conjugative cause. There's a perceived effect. You're looking at an association. Understand epistemology. Understand epistemology.
cholesterol, ApoB will go up, but it's a modest. It's not a big effect for most people. Now, notice I said it...
For most people. So are you drawing a conclusion? Are you drawing an inference to an entire population of people that weren't studied? Yes, you are.
Start with no cholesterol in your diet, right? Precisely because of that plateau. If you already start with substantial cholesterol in your diet, like most Westerners, right? Most people in Western countries are eating diets where there's already a substantial amount of cholesterol. Most of them are already...
Define substantial, Gil, because I would actually beg to differ.
At that plateau, right? So if you add more eggs on top, you're not going to see much difference.
Again, going back to what I was just saying, according to whom, on the basis of what? Substantial cholesterol. Who decides that?
Some studies run into this problem. They start out with a Western population, they add eggs, and they say, oh, it didn't make a difference for serum cholesterol, so eggs make no difference. That's partly true in that range, but you've got to look at the whole range.
Right, so now you're talking about how it depends on what population you're studying. Good. Extrapolate that logic to the one that you just cited.
So some of the studies that she's citing saying there's no significant effect probably have
Covered that.
issue. And again, this is for most people, right? This curve with a plateau, this is the average of thousands of people. There's an effect of eating cholesterol.
Was the average the responsible thing to report, especially considering that the residuals are not normally distributed in this linear regression?
On blood cholesterol, but it's a small one. So this is what most people are probably going to see. Then we have those 20 or 25 or 30% of hyperabsorbers. The effect for them is going to...
Ostensible hyperabsorbers. It depends. I have to look at how the study was actually done. I'm going to shut my mouth on that one from now on.
Larger. It could be 20 points, 30 points, or more. Then we have a hypoabsorbers, right? Where the effect's going to be smaller. You might see no effect of going from zero cholesterol to some. So again, bear in mind, individual results may vary. And this is pretty easy to test for yourself. Eat a certain diet and measure your blood work, and then change your diet for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and then measure again.
You mean estimate it when it comes to LDL? Because that's not measured at all. And it's based on a regression sum with an error around it, that error having a strength that I'm not aware of at the top of my head. How many things influence cholesterol levels in the body? How many things? How often do LDL levels fluctuate?
This research came out, and because of the mounting amount of evidence, in 2015, the US dietary guidelines were updated, and they removed completely cholesterol limits.
So now we're trusting the authorities? I don't care what they say. Okay? I care about what the authorities say whenever I have literally no other guidance to take, and they have a track record that is associated with success. Those two criteria must be met for me to actually trust authorities. We all trust authorities in some respect. It's not a problem of trusting authorities. That's not the problem. You don't want to ever, authority has a role to play. All right? Parents have authority over their children, for example. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But the context matters, and those criteria must be met. If the track record is extremely unsuccessful, you have a reason to start doubting them and to start taking matters into your own hands to learn what they purport to be experts in. Sound like someone you know?
said we no longer have to have a limit on eggs. This was in 2015. We no longer have.
Well, that's also not what that means, but logically speaking, because cholesterol doesn't just consist of eggs. What? Eggs don't just consist of cholesterol.
Worry about foods that contain cholesterol.
The guidelines never said that. This is like an old talking point from.
Oh, I'm not even familiar with the guidelines either. I'm just listening to what she has to say. If they didn't say that, that makes it even worse. Goodness.
2017 Twitter or something. So here's the guidelines she's talking about.
2015 to 2020. Okay, cool.
2015 edition. This is the section on dietary cholesterol.
All right, let's read it. The body uses cholesterol for physiological and structural functions, but makes more than enough for these purposes. Therefore, people do not need to obtain cholesterol through foods. Goodness me. Again with that word need there. Need for what? For surviving? Sure. For thriving? Nope. Doesn't seem so. The key recommendation from the 2010 dietary guidelines to limit consumption of dietary cholesterol to 300 milligrams per day is not included in the 2015 edition, but this change does not suggest that dietary cholesterol is no longer important to consider when building healthy eating patterns. As recommended by the IOM, individuals should eat as little dietary cholesterol as possible when consuming a healthy eating pattern. Okay, so basically the same propaganda. Right, all right, cool. It does put into question, though. I mean, why did they remove it? I'm curious to know. Maybe he'll cover it.
The recommendation to limit consumption to 300 milligrams a day is not included in this edition, but this change does not suggest that dietary cholesterol is no longer important to consider. Individuals should eat as little dietary cholesterol as possible.
Wait, and also, didn't we just cover that dietary cholesterol isn't really a problem because it doesn't seem that people absorb hardly any of it? So also, so Gil, you actually are going. You should be criticizing these guidelines then, right? Because that's not what the science says. So clearly you're showing an example of how they can be wrong, right? You're showing an example of how they can be wrong and how they're not always right about things. So you admit then that not all guidelines should be followed, right? So the guidelines can be wrong, and well, you disagree with them, and other people have reason to do so as well, then, right? And to not abide by them and the recommendations. Cool. Well, I'm glad that we covered that. Good.
While eating a healthy diet. So that's the opposite of what she said. Right?
Well, are you going to cover the fact that they're wrong actually, and that it's not based on any data that is sound? Because you just admitted that's not ostensibly true, right?
Guidelines never said that. I know where she's getting this idea because this was like a common talking point and a common back and forth back in, 6 or 7 years ago on social media. When these guidelines are being worked out, there's all kinds of documents. And there was an advisory document, an advisory report that was written that said, oh, let's not worry about dietary cholesterol anymore. And that got shared on social media a bunch. But that never made it to the guidelines.
Well, so what? Does that mean that report was not substantiated by any science of veracity and integrity and any logic of veracity and integrity? Or does that just mean that it didn't make it into the guidelines, Gil? The guidelines that have an opinion that you just spent 5 minutes discounting the substance that is purported to undergird that opinion. You just... So comment on that. Comment on that.
Disregarded that. So the guidelines never got changed in the direction of saying we don't worry about dietary cholesterol anymore. This is
right, and you said that we shouldn't, though, right? Because it doesn't matter.
Conception. It's
wow. Is Gil against the science? He must be anti-scientific. He's not trusting the guidelines. He's not following the guidelines. He's not supporting the guidelines.
Hasn't really looked at the guidelines. She heard this about that document. She's confusing the actual guidelines, the official guidelines from the
ones that you're saying are wrong, right?
USDA that go out to the entire country with this document. Anyway, I'm not even necessarily a fan of how they worded it here. I think this could be worded differently, more nuanced. I don't think this is entirely accurate.
So Gil does admit it. I was waiting for him to say it. Good. Good. You've said it. Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? So the guidelines can be wrong. According to Gil Carvalho. Well, you know what? That's a step in the right direction. Is he an active hypocrite in this respect? I haven't watched enough content from him. Not gonna lie. You tell me. Comment below.
But point is to say that the guidelines changed and they said we don't have to worry about cholesterol in foods anymore. That's just not true.
Well, who cares then if you just said you disagreed with the premise? Why did they remove it from their guidelines then? I mean, seriously. You must ask yourself why they got rid of it, though. I mean, isn't that an important question to ask?
Started saying what actually matters is saturated fats and trans fats.
Oh. Ma'am, are you going to start supporting this? Trans fats, okay. But the logic by which they are denigrating them is still flawed. At least the associations are stronger there. But how does the strength of an association, when you understand that association doesn't necessarily equal causation, but also a lack of an association does not necessarily indicate a lack of a causal relationship, really mean that much when you've got so many confounders and spurious variables in the data set? Does it really mean that much? The logic that you should employ in order to determine whether or not you should be consuming trans fats is how long as a species have we been consuming trans fats in the quantity that we have been consuming it today, generally speaking? Well, it has been for, I don't know, a little over 100 years. Okay? A little over 100 years. Is that enough time to have withstood that stark of a deviation away from our proper diet? Diet being something that is far more intimate, or has far more of an intimate influence over our genes than really anything else. So therefore, each unit of deviation, whatever that is most likely by that logic more significant in orders of magnitude, significant in its magnitude. Yeah. No. We're not adapted to that. It doesn't mean that we can't, that it will necessarily result in bad things. Okay, it's not to say that. We're all guinea pigs. This is natural selection. We try things. People are at risk when it comes to doing new things. Always. That is how it works. It's natural selection. We then use our reason and go, wow, I'm noticing associations in the people that I encounter that eat lots of these things with disease and sickness. And then our brains go and try and search for the most likely culprit in our opinions. They identify it and they go, I'm going to avoid that. Could be right, could be wrong. That is literally how nature works. That is natural selection. Okay? But they didn't do that. No, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. I'd have to look at what they actually did. The best inferences are composite inferences. So not just looking at those strong associations with lots of noise, but also looking at mechanisms, plausible mechanistic speculations, and then going from there. It's still, at the end of the day, it's more of an informed decision and more of an informed opinion when you do composite inferences with a bunch that are made up of a bunch of studies that are responsibly conducted, have sensible methodologies that actually pertain to the signal that you're trying to derive. But it still has its limitations, and oftentimes there are still ways in which they could have done a better job. So
True. So the type of fats in your diet are a much stronger factor in determining your blood cholesterol levels than the cholesterol in your food.
no, okay, associative factor, and yes, but not directly, but because the liver has the role to play in it's being provided substrate to produce the cholesterol. So it's something that I think is important to at least touch on, because there is more nuance to that picture.
So saturated fats for most people tend to increase cholesterol level, and unsaturated fats like mono or polyunsaturated fats tend to decrease cholesterol levels. So
No, they tend to be associated with lower cholesterol levels in the people studied, and saturated fat tends to be more associated with higher cholesterol levels or changes in cholesterol levels in people studied. Or by cholesterol, you could also mean LDL, so not cholesterol levels, LDL levels, which is different, and also not measured, estimated.
olive oil and nuts and seeds and stuff like that. And so
Yeah, stuff that you shouldn't be consuming as an individual of the species Homo sapiens sapien.
those are much stronger factors than how much cholesterol is in your food per se. And yeah, trans fats are bad, cause heart disease. Everybody agrees with.
All right, so you have no evidence to support that claim. Well, definitive evidence to support the idea that they unequivocally cause it. This is epistemological standards that need to be adhered to. Okay, I believe all of those things that you just said. At least that trans fats contribute to damage to arteries, which is the actual underpinning cause of heart disease. Beyond what the genes are most evolved to genotypically withstand in terms of the frequency of damage and the severity of the damage. Actually, because your blood vessels are also designed to be damaged. But anyway.
So what do we do with all this information?
Commercial break again.
Religiously, they are the foundation of my diet.
She's selling some other supplement now.
Adding the molecules and anti-spike has really allowed me to get to the next.
No way. Is that a joke? No way. That must be a joke. Why would she have 2 ads for the same product in such a short amount of time? Oh my God. What? Are you out of your mind?
Oh, it's the same slop.
1, bloating. I don't
even mind the sales pitches. I mean, YouTube runs ads on my videos. I just wish this was something with more science to back it up.
First factor for heart disease is small, dense LDL particles.
Oh my. Still we're dealing with cholesterol. We're still dealing with this. I'm about to end it here.
Cholesterol.
Yeah, small LDLs are problematic if they're.
No, they're not. Okay, there's no evidence to support that claim. They're literally carriers for cholesterol. SDLDL is more so associated with fructose and alcohol consumption, however, which damage arteries, induce inflammation in many other ways, okay, which influence heart disease development. They are an associative factor. They also are touted to have a higher propensity to enter arterial walls because of their size. but they still only end up there if you have damage to the f***ing endothelium. We're done.
Yeah, small LDLs are problematic if they're elevated. They're
Elevated according to whom on the basis of what? Normative ranges? That's fun. I've dealt with that before. Shall we deal with it again?
for heart disease. They're not.
No, we already covered the cause of heart disease. We're done with that.
They're not the only one, by the way. Careful with the tubular vision. Small LDLs can cause heart disease.
No, we already covered it, Gil.
Large LDLs can cause heart disease.
No, we already covered it, Gil.
They're frankly elevated. And there's other things that are not even LDL. There's VLDLs and remnants and all.
They don't cause heart disease, Gil. Whether it's a chylomicron, VLDL molecules, IDL molecules, SDLDL molecules, LDL molecules, it doesn't f***ing matter. They don't cause heart disease, Gil. Stop it. Respectfully.
Lots of particles that can cause heart disease. So,
No. Okay? Well, no, you know what? There's lots of particles that can influence heart disease development. Sure. Glucose is one of those particles. It's one of those molecules. Fructose. You've also got literally anything else that glycates tissues. So galactose, I suppose, but, you know. You've got oxalates. In fact, the oxalate crystals that are formed. That's something.
this is true, but it's not the only one.
The first thing we need to do is reduce sugar, because sugar and high insulin and high glucose levels and fructose in the body will make both of those things worse. It will prompt your liver to produce small particle LDL, and it'll
Okay, so based on flawed logic again, because they don't cause heart disease, okay, talk about glycation. That's what you're good at.
oxidize particles in your bloodstream.
The oxidized particles don't cause heart disease either. What happens is LDL arrives at the injured site, and they remain there and become oxidized because they are present in the arteries, which carries lots of oxygen through erythrocytes. That's what's going on. Then, as they become oxidized, they become deranged, and then the body launches an immune response on the area, and it's a catch-22 positive feedback situation. Positive feedback loop situation. Positive feedback situation. Good! You're doing good! You're doing well! Anyway.
So, instead of having orange juice and oats in the morning, which are carbs and turn to glucose.
Gil's shaking his head because, of course, orange juice and oats are things that we should be consuming as a species. Those are really good for you. All that fiber and all that bloating that'll happen as a result of it. All those phytates and oxalates and all those lectins and all those, you know, all that, not just fiber, but just soluble and insoluble fiber. All that glucose, all those carbohydrates, that glucose spike, you know, all that excess vitamin C. All that stuff's really good for you. That fructose as well. All that sorbitol. Yeah. Yep. Gil knows what he's talking about. Look at that. Look at that arrogant smile of his. Look at that. Zoom in on that. No, zoom in on it. Let's do it. Yeah. Yeah. No, good, Gil. Yeah. Real good. Real good. Anyway.
Have eggs. I'm not even kidding. Eggs are better.
Notice how she starts by saying, reduce the sugar in your diet. And then she shifts to a whole grain.
Yep, because what do they break down to? By the way, this whole grain thing that's talked about constantly, this complex carbohydrate thing. Check out a video that was done by Ryan Attar, or Attar, not sure where the accent is on that. A type 1 diabetic who's been on a carnivore diet for years and has achieved HbA1c values that are remarkably low, with no problems, and has to use far less insulin than normal type 1 diabetics do. He has measured his oral glucose level in his saliva after chewing one bite of whole grain bread. And it was astronomical. We're told that complex carbohydrates are slower to break down once you've consumed them. Nope, they're not. They break down to glucose in your damn mouth before you ever consume it, before you even swallow it. So keep that in mind too. So when talking about oats, it might take a little bit, the glucose that isn't yielded from its breakdown in your mouth, sure, it might take longer to yield it after it's been consumed because of the fiber and all that. But so what? It's breaking down into glucose into an amount that is beyond what the body requires at that moment and in an amount that will damage it. And does damage it. Gil, we're done.
Oats, right? She's basically lumping all carbohydrates together. So,
well, what do they all break down to, Gil? The only thing that's different between the carbohydrate sources is how fast they're absorbed and the ratio of the sugars that are actually yielded, glucose and fructose and galactose. That's it. So some are worse than others. They all break down to the same damn thing, though. Well, this poison's better for you than this poison. Good. Great. That's a waste of time, isn't it?
Candy and soda and fruit and whole grains.
Well, they're not the same. They have different levels of vitamins. They have different levels of minerals. But just because you put a bunch of vitamin C alongside cyanide, that doesn't mean you should be consuming the damn cyanide, does it? Okay? Guess what doesn't have any carbohydrates in it and also has vitamins and minerals in the exact amount for all of those that you actually require as a human being across time. Ruminant muscle meat.
All the same in her head. And her logic is sugar will raise small dense LDLs and it'll cause oxidation.
Which she has no evidence for, by the way.
The problem is this has been tested specifically for...
All right. No, the problem actually is that you don't understand the limitations of the science that you were purporting to be science. Gil. Let's see what this actually has to say, though. Let's get to this.
So this
randomized trial. Good. Cool. What do we got here? High fiber oat cereal compared with wheat cereal consumption favorably alters. Okay, so again, problems with the title. You know what? I'm going to skim through this a bit. Favorably alters LDL cholesterol, not cholesterol, subclass, and particle numbers in middle-aged and older men. All right, so a few things here. Define high fiber. Can you actually define high fiber? Let's see what they actually define it as. Okay, oat cereal compared with wheat cereal consumption. Okay. High fiber oat cereal. So is it just oats? Favorably alters LDL cholesterol subclass and particle numbers in middle-aged and older men. Right. So middle-aged and older men, what was the sample size? And also, can this be extrapolated to literally any other group besides middle-aged and older men? And what control was exerted and what control was not exerted? And how long did the study go on for and what was the sample size? Good. Okay. Abstract. Background. Don't care about that. Objective. No, we already know the objective from the title. Design. Okay. 36 overweight men. Oh, good. So they're also overweight. Great. Aged 50 to 75 years. Oh, man. Wow. Were randomly assigned to consume daily for 12 weeks, either oat or wheat cereal. What else did they consume? What else did they do? What else did they not consume and not do? Oh, my God. Providing 14 grams of dietary fiber a day. Before and after the intervention, okay, consume daily for 12 weeks, either oat or wheat cereal, providing 14 grams of dietary fiber per day. Before and after the intervention, plasma, lipid, and lipoprotein subclasses were measured with proton nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, yes, NMR, I talk about that all the time. And whole body insulin sensitivity was estimated with the frequently sampled intravenous glucose tolerance test. Right. Okay, cool. So what else influences insulin sensitivity? The construct of insulin sensitivity. Okay, results. Time by treatment interaction. For LDL cholesterol. You know what? What do we got here? Time by treatment interactions, P less than 0.05. Yep, for LDL cholesterol, oat around 2.5%, wheat around 8.0%. Okay, so increase or decrease? I would presume decrease, because they're talking about favorably alters LDL cholesterol subclass, meaning that since they believe in the myth that cholesterol causes heart disease, particularly LDL cholesterol, quote unquote, then they're talking about a lowering of it. So they're talking about lowering of it. Small LDL cholesterol, oat, 17.3%, wheat, 60.4%. And LDL particle number, oat, 5.0%, wheat, 14.2%. And LDL to HDL cholesterol, oat, 6.3%, wheat, 14.2% were observed. Cool. So what else could have influenced these numbers and these ratios besides that cereal over the course of 12 weeks? In 36 overweight men aged 50 to 75 years old. This is what we're dealing with. Time by treatment interactions were nearly significant for total cholesterol. Right. Okay. P of 0.08. Triacylglycerol. Right. Triglycerides. That's another term for it. Oat, 6.6%, wheat, 22%, P of 0.07. And VLDL triacylglycerol. So does that study actually inform upon whether or not these things were causally related to each other in any way, shape, or form? Were these values measured? So that's the first thing. Were these values actually measured, or were they estimated? Okay. What was the signal to noise ratio for these changes? Okay. You say, oat 2.5%, wheat 8.0%, plus or minus what? You're looking at an average or median decrease in these values. Okay. So that's the third thing that you need to look at. Was it normally distributed, in which case you would actually have to use a median. So actually have to figure out, did they report the correct, so did they report the correct value? Okay. What else were these people doing, and what else were these people not doing? What else were these people eating, and what else were these people not eating? How consistent was their behavior over the course of 12 weeks? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are the limitations. And 36 people, really. Okay. All right. So, what I will say in response to this is that, well, this does seem to, you're talking about, this seems to reinforce the position more so that you can absolutely have SDLDL decrease if you're eating these foods and these carbohydrates, in contrast with what Glucose Goddess was saying. Which, fair enough. At the end of the day, these values don't matter at all. And carbohydrates you shouldn't be consuming. So it still doesn't matter. But it's interesting nevertheless, I suppose. And then we didn't even really get into the glucose tolerance test. In fact, looking at this, I don't even know if it's listed on this snapshot. No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. So
Gave people oats, and their small LDL cholesterol actually decreased on the oats. And more importantly, their total LDL particles, the total number of LDLs, also decreased. And then oxidation of LDL particles has also been looked at in randomized trials after giving oats. Basically, it doesn't go up. Right? This ox-LDL.
There are multiple influential factors when it comes to all of this, because life is not linear. X goes to Y goes to Z, but things are, first of all, bidirectional. X can go to Y can go to X, Y can go to Z, Z can go to Y, etc. And also nexial, meaning that they exist within effectively a spider web net, with each intersection representing a random variable and each line being bidirectional. And when you look at life that way, oh boy, then do you realize the complexity?
LDL lab metric. By the way, if I'm being honest, that metric doesn't even matter. No.
It doesn't matter. All right. Well, you know what? I think we're done, Gil. You don't understand the mechanisms that all of the science is actually based upon in the first place. You don't understand any of this. Okay, and this is coming from someone. This is a PhD that we're dealing with. Okay, this is a PhD that we're dealing with. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. No, we're done. We're done with all this. We're absolutely done with this. At the end of the day, eat a carnivore diet that is congruous with what we are evolved to genotypically withstand. That is how this goes. Transition appropriately or prudently is really the word I should say, over the course of like the general range is 6 to 8 weeks, but you can go longer if you'd like. Don't go too slow, but also don't go too fast. You have to find, it's a very delicate balance. So do that, which consists primarily of the muscle meat and associated fat, the fat alongside it, that comes alongside it, of ruminant animals with added fat in the forms of butter, tallow, lard, suet, and ghee to taste, added salt to taste, and water. And I already covered the added fat thing. That's not ancestrally consistent, but it's because we're in a modern context and some animals are leaner than others that we would have encountered before. It's just, there's some nuance involved. So the best approximation that we can arrive at. And that's it. Don't consume carbohydrates. Don't consume oats and vitamin C, or vitamin C. Don't consume vitamin C. No, consume vitamin C. But orange juice, yeah, no. And potentially don't even eat breakfast. Eat when hungry. Stop when you're full. Okay? So, with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe as well to me if you haven't already. If you haven't done that, I'm watching you. I see you. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Buy my book, Contrainidicated, if you haven't already. As I stated earlier, subscribe to the Patreon if you haven't already as well, to gain access to 1 week early uploads, ad-free content, uncensored content, loads of antiquated videos from before I was ever a public figure, loads of Patreon exclusive uploads from whenever I was doing that once a week or so, and also an exclusive Discord server for Tier 3 members if you're interested in that kind of thing. And also, most importantly, link on the bottom of the screen. What is that link? Well, that is a link that will bring you to an amazing site with amazing products from an amazing brand known as Cerule. If you purchase product through that link, you will get a permanent percentage discount and permanent free shipping when signing up for monthly deliveries. And if you email me behind the scenes at edgoki@pm.me, I can tell you how to earn those products for free. Because who in their right mind wouldn't want that? But, of course, before buying any product at all, including ones such as this one, I wouldn't recommend doing it at all until you actually learn about them. So, fortunately for you, I have a video that I've linked in the top right corner of the screen, a Cerule Products video, which is a complete explanation of what these products are, who should take them, why you should take them, when to take them, etc., etc. And I'll also further migrate to the description below to find a video that I did on these products in further detail, as well as the company of Cerule itself, which I think is incredibly important if you're willing to make a contribution to the company via a purchase. So, with that being said, join me next time when we're reacting to more inanity, when we were reacting to more misunderstanding, statistics worship. Statistics worship. And myopia. Myopia? Yeah. So, till then.